In this presentation, we will take a look at multiple choice questions related to governmental accounting, going through those questions and then practicing test-taking skills with them. First question, which may be included as part of the net position section of a proprietary fund statement of net position, either A, retained earnings, B, capital, C, restricted net position, or D, common stock. Let's go through this again using the process of elimination, which may be included as part of the net position section of a proprietary fund statement of net position. Retained earnings. Now, when we see retained earnings, we should be thinking, well, that's corporate item. That's not going to be in the governmental accounting. We are considering what would be similar to the equity section, but you would think retained earnings, not going to be one of the items. Capital might be a little bit more something that we might think of. However, capital is usually kind of like the retained earnings that would be used if it was a sole proprietor rather than a corporation or a partnership, but I'll keep that for now. C says restricted net position. So we have that term restricted, which I'm a little skeptical about. I'm not real sure on that, but net position sounds more like a type of term related to the equity type section for the governmental accounting. And then D says the common stock. Common stock, again, sounds like a corporation type of thing. Common stocks for a corporation don't typically have common stock for a governmental entity, and therefore I don't think it would be D. We'll keep it with B and C, which may be included as part of the net position section of a proprietary fund statement of net position, either capital or restricted net position. Of the two, we're looking, the C should be the final answer, restricted net position. Next question. Which uses the same accounting basis as a proprietary fund, either A, permanent fund, B, investment trust fund, C, general fund, or D, capital project fund. Let's go through this again using the process of elimination, which uses the same accounting basis as a proprietary fund. So you'll recall when we think about these types of funds, we've got the governmental funds, the proprietary funds, the fiduciary funds. The governmental funds, largest grouping of funds. When we don't know where a fund goes, probably first guess is to say it's a governmental type fund. It uses a modified accrual. So the funds within that grouping, modified accrual as opposed to the normal accrual. The proprietary funds, typically having the internal service fund, the enterprise fund, use a more normal accrual basis because those are going to be more similar to a for-profit type of accounting. And then the fiduciary funds, acting as a fiduciary, are the other type of funds where there's some type of fiduciary type of responsibility. So given those three, let's go through these. We got the permanent fund. Where does it lie? Well, this might be not as easy to know. You might have a question on the permanent fund, but it's governmental fund. And the governmental fund is going to use the modified accrual basis, whereas the proprietary fund is going to be the one that's going to use an accrual basis. So these aren't going to be using the same, you wouldn't think. Then we have the investment trust fund. Now that sounds like a fiduciary fund, and of the three categories, that's the one that's most unclear as to what type of accounting basis it could typically be. But we would think that would probably be using an accrual basis, and therefore be the same as the proprietary fund. But I'll keep that one for now. The next is the general fund. The general fund is certainly a governmental fund. That's the first one that should come to mind, and it is a modified accrual basis, unlike the proprietary, which would be an accrual basis. Then the capital projects fund, once again, it being a governmental type fund and therefore on a modified accrual basis as opposed to the normal accrual as the proprietary fund would be. So B then, final answer, which uses the accounting basis as a proprietary fund, same accounting basis as a proprietary fund. B, the investment trust fund. Next question. Internal service funds is used when either A, government funds the activity with the general obligation debt, B, government provides services primarily externally, C, government provides services at a small profit, or D, government provides services primarily to other components of the same government. Let's go through this again using process of elimination. Internal service fund is used when either A, the government funds the activity with general obligation debt. Now that doesn't seem like it would be the causing factor. We would say internal service fund. The thing we want to think of when we see internal service fund is, well, that's going to be a proprietary type fund. Of the three types of funds, either governmental, proprietary, or fiduciary, proprietary type fund, therefore using an accrual type basis and it's internal as opposed to external, having to do with, do we provide the service to internal units of the government or externally to people outside the government? That's typically what we want to think through. Internal meaning internal to the government. B says government provides services primarily externally. Now, that's not true. That doesn't sound right because it's an internal service fund. So that would be the thing we would be looking for. I would be looking for the opposite of that. C says government provides services at a small profit. And well, that may be true. That could be the case. And then D says government provides services primarily to other components of the same government. And that's the one I would expect to be seen. So if you saw, for example, D and B are kind of opposites. So even if we were thinking that A or C might be relevant, you would think that it would have to be either B or D because they're kind of excluding each other. They cover all the bases. Either the government provides services primarily externally, or the government provides services primarily to other components of the same government. Considering those are covering all the bases, one of those two have to be true, you would think, and therefore we can typically narrow down between B and D, and of those two, D would be our final answer. D being government provides services primarily to other components of the same government for an internal service fund.